Welcome back to Good Knit Kisses. I'm your host Kristen, and today we are going to talk about knitting gauge. It's important to test knit a swatch and doing a little sample here of the main stitch that you're going to be using, and you can compare what's on the wrapper to what is called for in your pattern, and switching out your needles or your looms and your yarn in order to get that. So in order to get that, you need to make a swatch and you need to measure the gauge. So just to show you what this gauge was, I had a super bulky number 6 yarn that I knitted up, and I used a size 15 needle, but they're showing over here they made a 4x4 swatch, a 10 centimeter by 10 centimeter sample on a size 13 needle, and they got 9 stitches per inch or 12 stitches per row. That's what this little chart means. And just telling you some other information that this is acrylic and all that other stuff. And then this is for a crochet hook over here. But for our purposes, we're going to look over here. The sample that I've knit up is larger than a 4x4, but it's at least 4 inches this direction, and then it's much wider in this direction here. I don't have a measurement on me. So I have a little cheat sheet that I have next to me, and so what I've done is I've just drawn out a quick sketch. This is what it said, and then I've got my measurements. Now, when I measured it, I wrote my 4x4, and I got 2 stitches per inch and 2.75 or 2 3/4 rows per inch, and drew up my little chart here. I'm going to show you how I arrived at that. Today I'm using a knitting gauge by Boy. It's called Count Plus 10, and this is a really simple tool to have, and it has a little slider on it, and what you do is you count out how many stitches you want to look at, and you count out the 10. So this is real easy, 10. So we're going to count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And then we want to slide the slider over, and then we can see how many stitches that is. So if I take my knitting and I slide all the way over to the 10, it would line up and it would tell me how many stitches per inch. But I have a super bulky 6, and the reason why I showed you this is to show you know, that it may not necessarily fit on here. And so what you're going to do is, as you see, this slide won't go any further, and because it's a count 10, we'll count half of that, and then we'll take whatever this number is here and divide it by 2. So we're going to do 5. We're going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and we want to slide this over to here. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 stitches here, and when I slid this down, it lands on the 4. I'm actually going to take half this number because we're counting to 10, but because I can't get that many, I'm dividing it by 2. So I get 2 stitches per inch. And if you want to test it, you can just get out your tape measure and measure. And on these stitches, it's a lot easier because they're nice and large. But see how I get, there's 2 columns here, and that's 1 inch, so 2 stitches per inch. Now to get the rows, we're going to turn our work over this way, and then we want to count to 10. And mine, I've actually done it a little too tight for the sample. It should be more stitches. You know, need to do at least 10 rows for this to work, but you really should have a few more on either side of it in order to do it. So we're going to go all the way over to 10, and this one right here, it's still going to be, if it falls in here and it's just a little harder for you, you could count to 5. The main thing is when you make your swatch, you want to make it large enough to where you're measuring from the center and not from the sides. The sides can be skewed. So in this case, I'm just going to measure 5 again, and beginning of this one here starts here, and then we're going to go all the way down to 5. So we're going to start at the top of this and go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then we're going to go to the top of the next stitch. So you're going to be consistent on where you have that slid. Now, when I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, I look over here and it stops at 5.5. If I take this number, 5.5, divide it by 2, I get 2.75 or 2 3/4. So that's how I get 2 stitches per inch, and then 2.75 or 2 3/4 rows per inch, and it looks like this if I was to translate it over into a wrapper. So this is my particular sample. You could actually cut this out and then attach it to your sample and then keep that around, and you can even write on the back or attach the wrapper to it. And then that way you've got it a nice clear indication for later, even putting it in like a little snack baggie and keeping it in a nice little binder or ring for yourself for later. So I hope that has helped you on knitting gauge. Thanks for tuning in to Good Knit Kisses. I'm your host Kristen, and happy knitting!